December 16, 1944. The Ardennes forest of Belgium was silent, cold, and blanketed in a deceptive calm. On a low ridge near the hamlet of Lanzerath, First Lieutenant Lyle Bouck Jr., commander of the Intelligence and Reconnaissance Platoon, 394th Infantry Regiment, waited. At just 20 years old, Bouck was one of the youngest officers in the U.S. Army, leading a unit of 18 men trained for scouting and intelligence, not for frontline defense. Compelling evidence. The entire Allied front was operating under a critical command decision error, the belief that the Germans were incapable of launching a major offensive. The sector held by Bouck's 99th Infantry Division was deemed a ghost front, lightly held and strategically irrelevant. In reality, this sector was the key entry point, the Olosheim Gap for the German Sixth Panzer Army, the spearhead of Hitler's final, desperate gamble, involving elements of the elite First SS Panzer Division, Kampfgruppe Piper. Insightful expert, quote, Bouck had placed his men, along with 4 attached forward artillery observers, EFAOs, in well-reinforced, log-covered foxholes overlooking the crucial main road. His training, gained from a retention slot at Officer Candidate School, gave him a profound understanding of small unit defensive tactics, a skill about to be tested against 25 times his number. Vivid example. The platoon's firepower was sparse but well-positioned, mostly rifles, 1 light 30 caliber machine gun, and a hastily acquired Jeep-mounted 150 caliber machine gun for heavy support. This meager equipment was all that stood between the German offensive and a catastrophic breach. The rich explanation for Bouck's vulnerability is that his position was supposed to be supported by a tank destroyer unit, which, unknown to Bouck, had pulled out quietly overnight, leaving the 22 Americans completely isolated and lacking any anti-tank capability. Vulnerability is defined by command. A strategic intelligence failure combined with a critical logistical withdrawal leaves a tiny unit exposed to a catastrophic surprise. Bouck's INR platoon was the only obstacle in the path of a panzer army. The German offensive began not with infantry, but with a terrifying, massive artillery barrage that signaled the end of the quiet war. Compelling evidence. At 5:30 a.m., the silence was broken by an overwhelming 90-minute artillery bombardment, the opening salvo of the Battle of the Bulge. While most shells fell short or exploded in the trees, Bouck's reinforced positions protected his men, but the physical shock and noise were paralyzing. Crucially, the bombardment instantly severed all telephone lines. Bouck's platoon was left with only 1 radio, which delivered the final, chilling command decision from regiment, hold at all costs, confirming they were completely alone. Insightful expert, quote, the experience was psychologically jarring. Bouck later recounted the relentless force of the artillery, noting that while it didn't inflict immediate casualties, it served as a terrifying physical announcement that they were facing the full, unstoppable might of the Wehrmacht. Vivid example. As the shelling subsided, the silence returned, now charged with dread. Through the pre-dawn fog, Bouck's lookouts spotted the enemy, not scattered patrols, but long columns of German infantry. Fallschirmjäger and later elements of the Jake Volksgrenadier, marching down the road toward Lanzerath. The rich explanation for the German confidence in marching down the road is their assumption that the opening artillery barrage had completely shattered the light. American defense in this sector, believing they faced no organized opposition for miles. Artillery announces intent. The magnitude of the opening barrage confirmed the strategic scale of the German offensive. Bouck and his men understood they were not delaying a feint but fighting the main blow. As the sun began to rise on the battlefield, the statistical reality of the fight became horrifically clear. Bouck's 22-man platoon faced a German battalion of over 500 men, a terrifying mismatch of nearly 25,001 in numbers, which they planned to counter with sheer firepower and tactical deception. Compelling evidence. The enemy consisted of the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite paratroopers who were highly experienced and heavily armed. Bouck's objective was to make this battalion believe they were facing a well-supported American regiment. Bouck ordered his men to wait until the lead elements of the German column were within point-blank range, roughly 100 yards, to ensure every shot found its mark, maximizing the initial shock and creating instant carnage. Insightful expert, quote, the American defense was predicated on the psychological factor. Bouck knew the Germans assumed they were walking into an empty sector. The massed, surprise fire was designed to inflict immediate high casualties and shatter the enemy's confidence. Vivid example. A tense pause occurred when a Belgian girl from Lanzerath appeared on the road, speaking briefly with the German officers. Bouck, despite the urgency, refused to give the order to fire until the girl was safely away, demonstrating a chilling composure under extreme duress. The rich explanation for Bouck's initial success was the platoon's interlocking fields of fire and the devastating effectiveness of the .50 caliber machine gun. The opening burst of fire was so concentrated that dozens of German soldiers were instantly killed or wounded, turning the road into a horrific killing zone. Concentration defeats mass. In close quarters defense, concentrated, disciplined fire is the only counter to overwhelming numbers. Bouck's platoon achieved a perfect ambush, transforming the road into a slaughterhouse. The first German assault dissolved quickly, but the enemy commanders, enraged by the unexpected carnage, immediately launched a coordinated heavy attack against the isolated American position. Compelling evidence. The initial German casualties were so high, estimated at 40-50 men in the first few minutes, that a German officer soon approached under a white flag to request a temporary truce to remove the wounded, an action that confirmed the success of the American ambush. During the lull, Bouck realized the terrible statistical reality of his position. He had inflicted damage, but the enemy's size meant the fight was far from over. He used the time to redistribute precious dwindling ammunition and prepare for the inevitable counterattack. Insightful expert quote. The battle soon devolved into a siege. German mortar fire, which had been erratic during the barrage, now focused intensely on the American position, tearing up the surrounding trees and peppering the foxholes with shrapnel. Vivid example. The second German assault, launched through the growing smoke and snow, came in a wide flanking maneuver, forcing the small American force to stretch their fields of fire to the absolute limit. Bouck constantly moved along the line, firing his personal weapon and directing his men, repeatedly exposing himself to sniper fire. The rich explanation for the tenacity of the German counterattack is that the paratroopers understood the strategic importance of the road. Their orders were clear. The breach had to be made immediately to allow the massive Sixth Panzer divisions to exploit the gap and maintain Hitler's strict operational timetable. Defense buys time. Every casualty inflicted in a delaying action is a unit of time extracted from the enemy's operational schedule. Bouck's small force was systematically derailing the entire Sixth Panzer Army. As the long day wore on, the battle transitioned from a firefight to a grueling test of endurance, where the single most critical factor became the statistical reality of the platoon's dwindling ammunition supply. Compelling evidence. The platoon, designed for scouting, not sustained combat, had a finite, non-replaceable supply of ammunition. Every spent round brought them closer to their inevitable end. By mid-afternoon, the platoon had repelled 3 full German frontal assaults. They had inflicted massive losses, estimated by the Germans to be over 90 killed and wounded, but they were running desperately low on .30 caliber, .50 caliber, and rifle rounds, their primary defense evaporating with every passing hour. Insightful expert quote. Bouck later stated that the final hours were defined by silence, which was more terrifying than the noise. He had instructed his men to conserve fire so heavily that the Germans likely believed the American position had been reinforced by a regiment that was simply holding its fire. This was a triumph of psychological deception. Vivid example. The X-50 caliber machine gun, the platoon's most potent weapon, was eventually knocked out by focused German mortar fire. Private William Sakanikas, the machine gunner, was badly wounded but continued to fight, a testament to the iron-willed discipline that held the small line intact. The rich explanation for the platoon's longevity lies in their high ground and fortified positions. The heavy overhead logs and deep foxholes, prepared days earlier, protected them from the continuous enemy shelling and allowed them to fire down on the enemy without revealing their true numbers. Scarcity forces deception. A limited supply of ammunition must be managed to create the psychological illusion of endless fire. Bouck weaponized silence to hide the statistical reality of his ammunition count. The capture was inevitable, an act of courage and resignation that came only when the platoon was completely defenseless. Compelling evidence. Bouck had hoped to hold out until darkness provided cover for a withdrawal, but the German command was equally desperate. At dusk, under the cover of thick snow and escalating darkness, a German flanking force of approximately 50 paratroopers finally breached the position from the woods behind the ridge. The final confrontation was personal and sudden. With their ammunition completely gone, the remaining 15 men of the platoon were quickly overwhelmed and captured at gunpoint. Their heroic delaying action finally concluded. Insightful expert quote. The furious German paratroopers, witnessing the carnage inflicted by the small force, were initially intent on executing the Americans on the spot. Cooler heads ultimately prevailed. but the rage demonstrated the profound shock the platoon had inflicted on the German offensive. Vivid example. A key point of the ordeal. Not a single American soldier was killed during the long day of fighting, a miraculous statistical reality given the overwhelming odds and the duration of the intense combat. All 22 men, though captured, survived the Lanzerath engagement. The rich explanation for the strategic impact of the surrender is that the 10-hour delay achieved by Bouck's tiny unit threw the entire timing of the German Sixth Panzer Army into chaos. The precious hours bought by their sacrifice allowed other critical U.S. units to move into position further west, solidifying the northern shoulder of the Bulge. 0-hour achieved delay. A platoon's total sacrifice, ending only when ammunition is exhausted, can achieve strategic delay far beyond its size. The small unit action at Lanzerath cost the German spearhead a decisive day. The heroism of the Lanzerath platoon was immediately obscured and forgotten by the chaos of the massive German offensive, leading to a long, unjust silence regarding their action. Compelling evidence. The Americans were quickly processed as prisoners of war, POWs, and spent the remainder of the war enduring the brutal conditions of various German prison camps, including Nuremberg, Himmelberg, and Moosburg. Bouck himself suffered greatly during his captivity, battling illness and the severe psychological burden of what he initially viewed as a tactical failure. The loss of his men and the capture of his position, unaware of the immense strategic delay he had achieved. Insightful expert, quote, "The confusion and the sheer scale of the Battle of the Bulge, over 80,000 U.S. casualties, meant that the actions of small, isolated units like Bouck's INR platoon were lost in the overwhelming fog of the campaign." Vivid example. Recognition was further complicated because the men were captured. Since they were not present to give their accounts when the battle reports were filed, their heroic action was largely omitted from the official record, leading to 37 years of silence regarding their sacrifice. The rich explanation for the silence is that the American military often struggled to document heroism when the soldiers involved became POWs, inadvertently obscuring the greatest single small unit action of the entire war due to bureaucratic oversight. Capture silences valor. The chaos of a large-scale offensive and the immediate capture of heroes often leads to an unjust omission from official historical record. Bouck's platoon began a 4-decade wait for justice. Upon liberation and return home, Lyle Bouck began a decades-long personal battle for recognition for his men. A quieter war fought with letters, petitions, and personal resolve. Compelling evidence. Bouck spent the rest of his life campaigning tirelessly, arguing that every man who fought on Lanzerath Ridge deserved to be honored for the strategic delay they achieved. His fight was a testament to his unbreakable sense of loyalty and justice, driven by the knowledge that the sacrifice of his 22 men had materially contributed to the eventual Allied victory over the German spearhead. Insightful expert, quote, "The eventual breakthrough in recognition came largely due to the tireless efforts of Bouck and the research of historian Alex Kershaw, who documented the battle in the best-selling book The Longest Winter." Vivid example. Finally, on October 29, 1981, President Ronald Reagan personally intervened. Bouck was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second-highest military decoration, and every member of his platoon was decorated with either a Silver Star or a Bronze Star with V, for valor, making them the most decorated platoon of World War II, a powerful statistical reality of their extraordinary heroism. The rich explanation for the final recognition is that the full strategic impact of the 10-hour delay only became clear through decades of historical research. The platoon's small action prevented a major breach that could have cost the Allies weeks and thousands of lives, proving the immense value of their sacrifice. Recognition affirms impact. The value of a heroic act is often measured not by immediate reward, but by the eventual historical confirmation of its strategic impact. The medals confirm that the 20-year-old lieutenant had fundamentally disrupted Hitler's last gamble. The Battle of Lanzerath Ridge created an immediate, irreversible strategic ripple, confirming that Bouck's small, isolated action fundamentally altered the momentum of the entire Battle of the Bulge. Compelling evidence. The 10-hour delay prevented the German 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment from meeting its rigid operational timeline. This delay prevented them from clearing the crucial road for the follow-on armored units, specifically the 1st SS Panzer Division, Kampfgruppe Piper. The ensuing confusion and buildup of German forces behind Lanzerath gave American forces further west, which were now fully alerted to the offensive, precious time to consolidate their positions and prepare effective anti-tank defenses. Insightful expert, quote, "Military analysts confirm that had the Losheim Gap been breached instantly, Kampfgruppe Piper would have been on the road to the Meuse River hours earlier, potentially reaching critical objectives before organized resistance could be formed. Vivid example. The delay allowed key American units, particularly elements of the 7th Armored Division and other infantry units, to race into position near Saint-Sampol, Vith and Elsenborn Ridge, consolidating this northern shoulder of the Bulge, the sector that ultimately held firm and doomed the German offensive. The rich explanation for the strategic value is that delaying a mechanized spearhead in a time-sensitive offensive is equivalent to destroying it. Bouck's 22 men sacrificed their freedom to destroy the enemy's most critical resource, time. Delay defeats blitzkrieg. The successful delay of an armored spearhead in a time-sensitive offensive is the strategic equivalent of its destruction. Bouck's platoon destroyed the German timetable, ensuring the entire offensive would fail. The story of Lyle Bouck's platoon remains a powerful, eternal statistical reality about the immense value of small unit action and individual heroism in modern warfare. Compelling evidence. The final decorations. The Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars for every member are a unique statistical reality that permanently enshrines the platoon's courage. Their ability to hold off a force 25 times their size, inflict over 90 casualties, and survive without losing a man is a tactical feat that is almost unparalleled in the history of the U.S. Army. It is a testament to the effectiveness of highly trained, disciplined small units. Insightful expert, quote, "The legacy of the platoon serves as a permanent rebuttal to the early German arrogance that the American soldier was not worth a penny. Their action proved that the American spirit, when properly deployed, was an insurmountable force." Vivid example. The small, quiet ridge at Lanzerath today stands as a monument to their defiance. It is a quiet battlefield, but one where the largest campaign of the Western Front was momentarily halted by the will of 22 men, ensuring the final defeat of Hitler's last gamble. The rich explanation for their enduring legacy is that the platoon's story affirms the power of the individual. In a war of massive armies and industrial scale, the courage and tactical skill of a handful of young men fundamentally shifted the course of one of the war's most crucial battles. Individual heroism shifts history. The concentrated courage and tactical skill of a small unit can achieve strategic results far beyond its size. Lyle Bouck's 22 men are the eternal symbol of the American spirit in the Battle of the Bulge. The fury of the German paratroopers who captured Bouck's platoon was a direct measure of the catastrophic loss the tiny American position had inflicted, leading to an immediate, surprising insight. The German battalion, having lost a crucial day and nearly 100 men, faced immediate strategic punishment from their own high command. Compelling evidence. The primary tactical goal of the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment was to sweep aside the American screen and open the Lochheim Gap for the heavy armor of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Kampfgruppe Piper. The unexpected 10-hour delay shattered the timetable. The delay forced the Fallschirmjäger to divert significant time and resources to recovering their casualties and reorganizing their assault, guaranteeing that the road to Lanzerath would not be clear for the panzers when expected. This bottleneck was fatal to the entire offensive schedule. Insightful expert, quote, "German staff reports later confirmed that the delay at Lanzerath Ridge had a cascading effect on the entire northern shoulder. The inability of the German spearhead to reach the Meuse River bridges on schedule was a direct consequence of small unit actions like Bouck's." Vivid example. The German battalion, already depleted by the high statistical realities of casualties, over 90 men, was immediately pushed back into the fight, facing heavier American resistance further west. The German commander had to explain to his superiors why his elite unit was stalled by an unseen American force that turned out to be less than 24 men. The rich explanation for the strategic cost is that the Blitzkrieg offensive was entirely dependent on speed and exploitation. By denying speed, Bouck's platoon effectively destroyed the exploitation phase before it could even begin, turning the German spearhead into a blunt, delayed instrument. Delay costs victory. In a time-sensitive, mechanized offensive, a successful multi-hour delay is the strategic equivalent of a military defeat. The German battalion paid the tactical price for their superior strategic overreach. The immense German casualties led to a chilling act that underscored the brutality of the SS Panzer Division, which was forced to follow the delayed paratroopers. Compelling evidence. As the 1st SS Panzer Division finally began its push through the area, it was met by a scene of chaos and the bodies of the Fallschirmjäger victims. This frustration contributed to the notorious Malmedy massacre, which occurred just hours later. While not directly responsible, The fury unleashed by the delay and the subsequent confusion fueled the rage of the CSS soldiers, who were already operating under explicit ideological orders to take no prisoners and show no mercy to captured Americans. Insightful expert, quote, historians connect the tactical frustration experienced by the German spearhead in the early hours of the Bulge, frustration caused by unexpected resistance like Bouck's, to the subsequent atrocities, viewing the events as a tragic chain reaction stemming from the shattered timetable. Vivid example. The fury of the German advance ensured that resistance further west, though facing overwhelming numbers, was instantly hardened. News of the Malmedy atrocity reached American lines rapidly, reinforcing the no-surrender policy that characterized the brutal defense of the northern shoulder. The rich explanation for this psychological ripple is that the German military leadership's ideological brutality, coupled with tactical frustration, inadvertently hardened American resistance. The initial delay led to an act of terror that paradoxically strengthened the resolve of the American defenders. Atrocity hardens resistance. Acts of military brutality, often fueled by tactical frustration, serve only to stiffen the enemy's will to fight. Bouck's platoon bought the time that allowed the northern shoulder to solidify its no-surrender defense. The surrender at Lanzerath Ridge initiated the long, brutal prisoner of war (PO) deal for Lyle Bouck and his men, a psychological and physical trial that lasted until the final days of the war. Compelling evidence. The men were initially held in temporary field cages before being transferred deep into German territory, experiencing the worsening conditions as the Third Reich collapsed. They were split and sent to various camps, including Nuremberg, Oflag 3013-6, and Moosburg, Stalag 67A. The prisoners endured extreme cold, malnutrition, and the constant fear and uncertainty of life under the collapsing Nazi regime, a psychological burden that haunted them long after the war ended. Insightful expert, quote, Bouck later recalled the constant hunger and the specific memory of witnessing the final, panicked chaos within the German ranks as the Allied armies approached, highlighting the immense contrast between the initial, confident invaders and the desperate, defeated guards. Vivid example. In a desperate final move known as the Death March, Bouck and his fellow prisoners were forced to march long distances across Germany in the brutal winter cold, away from the advancing Allied armies, a final grueling act of attrition by their captors. The rich explanation for the harshness of the late war POW experience is that the German military system, facing total collapse and chronic supply shortages, could barely feed its own troops, let alone Allied prisoners, leading to rampant disease and starvation in the camps. Captivity is a battle. The life of a prisoner of war under a collapsing regime is a fight against disease, starvation, and the breakdown of order. Bouck's platoon won the battle, but lost the subsequent war of attrition until liberation. The final weeks of Bouck's captivity brought a harrowing close call, illustrating the unpredictable danger of the collapse. Compelling evidence. Bouck was held in the POW camp near Himmelberg, which was the target of a disastrous raid by General George S.S. Patton's task force bomb, an ill-conceived attempt to liberate Patton's son-in-law. During the ensuing chaos of the raid, Bouck, who was wounded, pretended to be a field-grade officer to gain influence, and initially joined the task force bomb survivors attempting to fight their way out, only to be recaptured by the overwhelming German counterattack. Insightful expert, quote, Bouck was eventually liberated by U.S. forces from Moosburg, suffering from severe malnutrition and contracting hepatitis. His immediate hospitalization upon returning to the U.S. confirmed the immense physical toll the late war prison experience exacted. Vivid example. The liberation brought the stark contrast between the emaciated prisoners and the well-fed American liberators. For Bouck, the end of the war was marked not by celebration, but by months of medical recovery, cementing the personal cost of his heroism. The rich explanation for the high rate of long-term illness among late war POWs is that the final months of captivity exposed them to the worst of the German collapse, leading to diseases that required years of medical treatment and serving as a quiet, unseen scar of the Battle of the Bulge. Scars outlast battle. The physical and psychological toll of late war captivity often creates the longest-lasting burden of the conflict. Bouck's heroism was followed by a long, silent recovery. The most protracted battle Bouck fought was not against the German army, but against the U.S. Army's bureaucracy, a decades-long struggle to confirm the statistical reality of his platoon's heroism. Compelling evidence. For 37 years, the actions of the Lanzerath Platoon were largely omitted from the official U.S. Army history of the Battle of the Bulge. The fact that the entire platoon was captured contributed significantly to the obscurity. Because the men were POWs and unable to provide their immediate accounts during the critical after-action review phase, their deeds were overlooked. A devastating example of how bureaucratic processes can obscure genuine heroism during the chaos of war. Insightful expert quote, Bouck felt a profound sense of failure, not for being captured, but for the lack of recognition for the 21 men who fought under him. He wrote countless letters and petitions, arguing that the true strategic value of their delay was immense. Vivid example. The fight for recognition was deeply personal. Bouck demanded that the full impact of the action, halting an entire battalion and delaying the Sixth Panzer Army, be acknowledged, not for personal glory, but for the historical record of his platoon, demonstrating an unbreakable sense of loyalty. The rich explanation for the extended silence is that the sheer scale of the Battle of the Bulge made accurate historical documentation difficult. Only through decades of patient cross-referencing of German and American records did the full strategic consequence of the Lanzerath delay become evident. Bureaucracy obscures history. The chaos of a large-scale conflict can inadvertently omit critical acts of heroism from the official record. Bouck's sacrifice was followed by a 4-decade war for recognition. The final victory for Bouck came in 1981, a moment that finally affirmed the strategic ripple of the platoon's action and validated their decades-long struggle. Compelling evidence. The eventual research confirmed that the platoon's 10-hour stand was a decisive factor in the defense of the northern shoulder, preventing a fatal breach in the early hours of the offensive. In 1981, following congressional review, President Ronald Reagan intervened. Bouck was awarded the Ace Distinguished Service Cross, and every member of his platoon received either the Silver Star or the Bronze Star with V for valor, making them the most decorated platoon of World War II. A powerful final statistical reality. Insightful expert, quote, The long-delayed medals served as a powerful historical correction, confirming that small unit action, when executed with tactical brilliance and courage, can have a material impact on the largest strategic operations. Vivid example. The recognition transformed the memory of the event from a tactical defeat being captured to an immense strategic victory, delaying an entire Panzer Army, providing ultimate vindication for Bouck and his men. The rich explanation for the emotional power of the recognition is that it confirmed the central lesson of the Battle of the Bulge. The ultimate triumph was achieved not by sheer power, but by the relentless courage and discipline of the American infantrymen, often in isolated, desperate circumstances. Truth is vindication. Decades of historical research can eventually vindicate the strategic value of a long-forgotten tactical sacrifice. The medals affirmed the historical weight of the 10-hour stand. The tactical action at Lanzerath Ridge had a geopolitical ripple, creating a final, surprising insight. The delay caused by Bouck's 22 men contributed to a critical strategic bottleneck that ultimately helped shape the final political geography of post-war Europe. Compelling evidence. The crucial delay of the Sixth Panzer Army contributed to the failure of the German spearhead to reach the Meuse River. This allowed the Allied High Command to redirect forces, ultimately holding the northern line firm. Had the northern shoulder collapsed, the German advance toward Antwerp, the key Allied logistical port, would have been catastrophic, potentially stalling the Western Front for months and diverting resources desperately needed to hold the line against the relentless Soviet advance in the east. Insightful expert, quote, Military analysts often speculate that a sustained German breakthrough to the Meuse River would have profoundly complicated the Allied final drive on Germany, indirectly prolonging the war and potentially changing the alignment of forces that met on the Elbe River. Vivid example. The successful defense of the northern shoulder, to which Bouck's delay was integral, ensured that the Allied advance could resume swiftly in early 1945, guaranteeing the Western Allies secured crucial territory and strategic positions before the war's end. The rich explanation for this geopolitical ripple is that the failure of Hitler's final gamble solidified the Allied position in the West, ensuring that the major turning point of the war remained the collapse of the Eastern Front, which the German forces were unable to address due to this prolonged, costly offensive. Small action, large ripple. The successful defense of a key tactical position can have cascading, long-term geopolitical consequences. The delay at Lanzerath secured the Western Allies' strategic initiative. The enduring legacy of Lyle Bouck's platoon remains a powerful, eternal statistical reality about the immense value of small unit action and individual heroism in modern warfare. Compelling evidence. The final decorations. The Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars for every member are a unique statistical reality that permanently enshrines the platoon's courage. Their ability to hold off a force 25 times their size, inflict over 90 casualties, and survive without losing a man is a tactical feat that is almost unparalleled in the history of the U.S. Army. It is a testament to the effectiveness of highly trained, disciplined small units. Insightful expert quote, "The story serves as a permanent rebuttal to the early German arrogance that the American soldier was not worth a penny. Their action proved that the American spirit, when properly deployed, was an insurmountable force." Vivid example. The small, quiet ridge at Lanzerath today stands as a monument to their defiance. It is a quiet battlefield, but one where the largest campaign of the Western Front was momentarily halted by the will of 22 men, ensuring the final defeat of Hitler's last gamble. The rich explanation for their enduring legacy is that the platoon's story affirms the power of the individual. In a war of massive armies and industrial scale, the courage and tactical skill of a handful of young men fundamentally shifted the course of one of the war's most crucial battles. Individual heroism shifts history. The concentrated courage and tactical skill of a small unit can achieve strategic results far beyond its size. Lyle Bouck's 22 men are the eternal symbol of the American spirit in the Battle of the Bulge. The final, essential lesson of Lanzerath Ridge, as exemplified by Lyle Bouck, remains the absolute power of discipline and training over superior numbers, creating a concluding thought. Provoking advice point. Compelling evidence. Bouck's small unit was able to achieve this disproportionate success because they had previously spent months training intensively in small unit defensive tactics, a testament to the value of relentless practical training over static defense. The high level of discipline demonstrated by the men holding fire until the enemy was in point-blank range and maintaining their positions even after being told they had no support was the direct result of this intensive training, transforming a reconnaissance unit into an elite fighting force. Insightful expert. Quote, Bouck, who taught small unit tactics at OCS, stated that the key was the men's belief in their training and in each other. Their technical skill allowed them to use their limited firepower with devastating efficiency. Vivid example. The fact that all 22 men survived the day, despite inflicting nearly 100 casualties, is the ultimate testament to the effectiveness of their reinforced positions and their calculated, precise fire. A tactical miracle born of preparation, not luck. The rich explanation for the timeless legacy is that the Battle of Lanzerath Ridge provided a clear, undeniable lesson to all armies. The combination of discipline, training, and courage in a small, well-led unit can overcome massive logistical and numerical disadvantage, offering the final, powerful rebuttal to Hitler's last gamble. Training conquers numbers. In modern warfare, the superior execution of small unit tactics, born from rigorous training, can decisively defeat a numerically superior enemy. Lyle Bouck's platoon validated the American way of war. The most astonishing aspect of the stand at Lanzerath Ridge was the tactical miracle achieved by Lyle Bouck's platoon, holding off a force 25 times its size for nearly a full day without suffering a single fatality. This reality is rooted in the platoon's mastery of small unit defensive doctrine and sheer psychological fortitude. Compelling evidence. The platoon's survival was a direct consequence of their log-reinforced foxholes and expertly prepared, interlocking fields of fire. The overhead protection, designed to counter artillery tree bursts, proved vital in shielding the men from German shelling and mortar fire throughout the day. Furthermore, the platoon's discipline, waiting until the enemy was at point-blank range, ensured that their limited ammunition was used with maximal statistical efficiency, maximizing enemy casualties while minimizing the duration of their exposure to direct fire. Insightful expert quote, Military tacticians often cite this action as a textbook example of how a well-positioned, disciplined small unit can leverage terrain and preparation to achieve asymmetric defense. The terrain and preparation neutralized the German numerical advantage. Vivid example. The immense German frustration, evidenced by the demand for a truce to remove the wounded and the later fury of the capturing unit, confirmed the psychological impact of the action. The Germans were fighting ghosts, a force that inflicted catastrophic losses yet remained unseen and intact. The rich explanation for the zero-casualty survival is the paradoxical combination of preparation and fire discipline. Bouck's men were trained to fight from concealment and manage their fire volume to project the psychological illusion of a much larger, fully manned defensive line, a deception that saved their lives. Discipline ensures defense. In small unit tactics, disciplined fire and excellent field fortification are the ultimate counters to massed attacks. Bouck's platoon fought a perfect textbook defense. The experience left an indelible psychological burden on the platoon members, even those who emerged physically unscathed. Compelling evidence. The ordeal of the 10-hour stand, the intense hand-to-hand engagements, and the constant fear of being overrun were immediately compounded by the physical and emotional trauma of the subsequent POW ordeal under the collapsing Nazi regime. While they survived the battlefield, the men carried the lifelong scars of late war captivity, marked by malnutrition, disease, and the psychological weight of witnessing the Malmedy atrocities' aftermath. A devastating hidden cost of their heroism. Insightful expert. Quote, Bouck's decades-long fight for recognition was itself a form of therapeutic resolution. He stated his mission was to confirm the historical reality of his platoon's sacrifice, arguing that official recognition was necessary to heal the unseen scars of their capture and imprisonment. Vivid example. The long delay in recognition, 37 years, exacerbated this trauma. The men were unable to fully reconcile their immense battlefield success with the official silence, leading to a long, painful disconnect between their personal memory and the public record. The rich explanation for the lasting psychological impact is that the men endured not one, but two continuous traumas, the extreme violence of the battle, immediately followed by the systemic dehumanization of the collapsing POW system. Their physical survival came at a high, long-term mental cost. Scars demand validation. The immense psychological toll of continuous combat and captivity often necessitates historical validation to achieve resolution. Bouck's post-war fight was for justice and psychological closure. The legacy of Lanzerath Ridge resides in its demonstration of a crucial strategic paradox. A seemingly insignificant tactical action, when executed perfectly, can achieve an operational delay that fundamentally alters the course of a major strategic offensive. Compelling evidence. The 10-hour delay achieved by Bouck's 22 men prevented the German Sixth Panzer Army from hitting its timetable for the Meuse River crossings. This delay, compounded by other pockets of resistance, allowed the American northern shoulder to consolidate and hold, ultimately dooming Hitler's final gamble. The success affirmed the power of the Sioux-American way of wars, leveraging small unit training, superior firepower management, and the indomitable will of the individual soldier to defeat the enemy's massive but rigid offensive doctrine. Insightful expert, quote, The action is studied globally as a definitive example of the decisive delay. In a blitzkrieg offensive that relies entirely on speed, destroying the enemy's timetable is the same as destroying their entire army. Vivid example. The ultimate vindication for the platoon was the 6 Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars for every member. A unique statistical reality, confirming that the High Command finally understood the immense, disproportionate value of their sacrifice in the context of entire European campaign. The rich explanation for the paradox is that the German military system failed to account for the possibility of such stubborn, tactically brilliant resistance from an American reconnaissance unit. They anticipated a quick rout, not a determined defense, and that miscalculation cost them the war's final initiative. Tactical success alters strategy. A perfect tactical execution in a critical defensive bottleneck can achieve massive, long-term strategic benefits. Lyle Bouck's platoon destroyed the German timetable, ensuring the entire offensive would fail. The story of Lyle Bouck and his platoon is the eternal symbol of the American spirit in the Battle of the Bulge, creating a final, somber thought. Provoking advice point. Compelling evidence. Their heroism solidified the Northern Line, confirming that the defense of the Bulge was won not by vast armies alone, but by the relentless courage and discipline of small units fighting in isolated, desperate circumstances. The legacy stands as a powerful, permanent rebuttal to the early German arrogance that dismissed the American infantrymen, proving that training, discipline, and the will to fight were an insurmountable force in the final stages of the war. Insightful expert quote, The courage of the 22 men at Lanzerath Ridge affirms the profound moral clarity of the American cause in World III, sacrificing personal freedom and safety to defend a position that benefited the entire Allied front. Vivid example. Today, the quiet ridge at Lanzerath stands as a monument to their defiance. It is a humble place where a handful of young men, led by a 20-year-old lieutenant, stood alone against the might of the German offensive and fundamentally changed the course of the largest battle ever fought by the U.S. Army. The rich explanation for the enduring power of the story is that it captures the essence of courage under extreme duress, the ability to act decisively, even when all hope and support have been withdrawn. Lyle Bouck's platoon is the eternal embodiment of the individual hero's power to shift history. Courage is the ultimate force multiplier. In a war of industrial scale, the concentrated bravery and tactical brilliance of a few can decisively defeat the numerical advantage of many. The Lanzerath stand remains an eternal lesson in military history.